My adoptive brother faked brain cancer for months because I was accepted into university, causing our parents thousands of dollars in medical bills, but now his adoption is being annulled. I need to vent somewhere because no one in my family believes me, and I'm starting to question my own sanity. My 21-year-old brother Nelson has been sabotaging my life for years, and his latest stunt could have cost me my future career as a doctor. I'm 19, and Nelson has always played the role of our family's golden child. Our parents adopted both of us when we were young, me at 3 and him at 5. From day one, Nelson made it clear he didn't want a little sister following him everywhere. When I won the school spelling bee at 10, he complained of severe stomach pains just before I was to receive my award. Our parents had to leave early to take him to urgent care, and I went with them because I was a child. The doctor said it was probably just gas. In middle school, I started playing the violin and got pretty good. The music teacher chose me for a solo in the winter concert. I practiced for months. The night before the concert, Nelson said he felt pressure in his chest and couldn't breathe properly. We had to spend the whole night in urgent care with him, wondering if we'd make it to the performance. We didn't. Nelson was diagnosed with anxiety and given breathing exercises to do at home. New challenges arose in high school. I focused on my grades and started volunteering at the local hospital. I knew I wanted to be a doctor, partly because of all the time I spent in hospitals watching Nelson get checked for his supposed ailments. I learned a lot about symptoms and medical procedures just by observing. I also learned to spot when someone was exaggerating or making things up. Ultimately, Nelson gave me some tools that might prove useful as a doctor. It seemed like Nelson calmed down in my second and third years of high school. He got into a decent university and moved away for most of the year. I thought maybe he had outgrown his need to compete with me and was finally an adult. But that's not what happened. Last spring, I received the news I had worked years for. I was accepted into medical school. All the effort I'd put into this paid off, so I was beyond happy. Our parents were thrilled and started planning a celebratory dinner. That's when Nelson made his move. The day after I received my acceptance letter, he unexpectedly returned from university. He looked terrible, pale, thin, and exhausted. He told our parents he had been hiding something serious to avoid worrying them during final exams. He claimed he had been experiencing severe headaches, vision problems, and memory loss for months. He said he had finally gone to the campus doctor who was concerned about a possible brain tumor. Our parents went into complete panic. They immediately started researching brain tumors online. Nelson milked the situation for all it was worth. He stumbled when he walked. He claimed he couldn't remember certain words and squinted as if light bothered him. The celebration dinner for my medical school acceptance was postponed indefinitely. Instead, our house became a medical research center dedicated exclusively to Nelson's supposed brain tumor. This is what made me suspicious from the start. Nelson had been posting photos on social media of university parties just weeks before his return. In those photos, he looked perfectly healthy and happy. He was dancing, playing beer pong, and staying up late with friends. None of his posts mentioned headaches or vision problems. I also noticed that his symptoms seemed to worsen when our parents were present but improved when they left the room. When Mom and Dad went to the supermarket one afternoon, I watched him through a crack in his bedroom door. He was sitting normally using his phone without any vision issues and didn't look like someone with severe headaches. Medical appointments began to pile up. First, Nelson saw our family doctor, who referred him to a neurologist. The neurologist ordered an MRI, which came back normal. Instead of being relieved, Nelson claimed his symptoms were worsening. He said the headaches now came with nausea and dizziness. During that time, my own preparations for medical school took a back seat. I had to complete various forms, arrange housing, and attend an orientation weekend. But every conversation with our parents was interrupted by updates on Nelson's condition or calls from doctors' offices. The neurologist referred Nelson to an oncologist for a second opinion. More tests were ordered, blood work, another MRI with contrast, and something called a lumbar puncture. All results came back normal, but Nelson insisted something was still wrong. He started researching rare brain diseases online and suggesting them to the doctors. Meanwhile, I discovered something interesting. One day, he left his laptop open, and I saw his browsing history. He had been researching brain tumor symptoms extensively, not to understand his condition, but apparently to learn how to fake them better. He had searched for things like how long headaches should last, what kind of vision problems brain tumors cause, and what symptoms doctors look for during neurological exams. I also discovered he had been lying to his university friends about being home. His social media showed he was supposedly still at school taking summer courses, but in reality he was at home lying down and acting sick whenever our parents were around. I tried to talk to our parents about my suspicions, but they cut me off immediately. But then something happened that confirmed what I suspected. I was helping Mom organize Nelson's medical paperwork when I found a printed email in his folder. It was supposedly from his university health center documenting his initial complaint of headaches and vision problems, but the email address was wrong. I had been to that university health center when I visited him and remembered their actual email format. This email came from a Gmail address made to look official. Nelson had forged the document that started this whole medical saga. I printed a screenshot of the health center's actual website showing their true contact information. I planned to show the evidence to our parents, but before I could, Nelson announced that the doctors had found something concerning in his latest tests. He said there was a small anomaly that could indicate a rare form of brain cancer. Our parents were devastated. They began researching treatment options and oncology centers. My medical school orientation weekend was canceled because they needed me to help coordinate Nelson's care. It was then I realized I had to do something drastic. I couldn't let Nelson destroy my future along with everyone's peace of mind. I decided to conduct my own investigation to gather irrefutable proof of his deception. I started by calling his university health center directly. I pretended to call about my own medical records and casually asked about their email format and appointment procedures. The staff confirmed they never send medical information via Gmail and that all their official communications come from their university domain. Then I installed a hidden camera in the room where Nelson often reclined, saying he was too sick to move. For 3 days, I recorded hours of footage showing him getting up normally, walking without difficulty, and using his phone for long periods without apparent vision problems. I also tracked his online activity using the family computer's browser history. During times when he claimed to have severe symptoms, he was actually playing online games, watching videos, and chatting with friends. The final piece of evidence came from his own carelessness. One night, he left his phone unlocked while showering. I found text messages between him and his university roommate where he bragged about getting out of summer classes by faking illness. He wrote that our parents were paying for expensive medical tests and that he was enjoying the attention and sympathy. Now I have concrete proof that Nelson was faking his entire medical crisis, but I know our parents won't want to believe it. They have invested so much time, money, and emotional energy in his supposed illness that admitting they've been deceived will be devastating for them. But I'm tired of him doing all this out of jealousy for attention or whatever reason he's doing it. I'm tired of him and my parents running around after him for every single thing he invents. I'm going to show them everything, but I need more ideas so my parents can truly see Nelson for who he is and stop falling for his deceptions again and again. Update 1. I spent 2 days organizing everything I had gathered and asked our parents to sit down for a serious conversation. I told them I had important information about Nelson's medical situation that they needed to see. Mom immediately became defensive and said she didn't want to hear any more of my theories about Nelson faking his symptoms. Dad was more willing to listen, perhaps because the accumulating bills were a greater concern. I started by showing them the forged email from the university health center. Mom's first reaction was to say that maybe Nelson had just gotten the email address wrong or that the center had multiple contact methods. Then I showed them the text messages. There were Nelson's own words bragging about deceiving doctors and enjoying the attention. The hidden camera recordings were what finally convinced them. Seeing Nelson move normally, use his phone without vision problems, and show no signs of the supposed severe headaches was undeniable proof that he had been lying. Dad stood up and left the room without saying a word. Mom started to cry and couldn't believe Nelson would do something like this. She said she didn't understand why he would put them through so much worry and expense. We decided to confront Nelson together that same night. When he came down for dinner, still acting weak and holding his head as if in pain, our parents sat him down and showed him the evidence. Nelson was furious and accused me of spying on him and violating his privacy. He said I was jealous of the attention he was receiving and that I had gone too far to discredit him. He tried to justify each piece of evidence. He claimed the fake email was a misunderstanding, his messages were taken out of context, and the recording showed brief moments when his symptoms weren't as severe. But our parents no longer believed him. Dad demanded he tell the truth about his health. When Nelson kept insisting he was sick, Mom lost her patience. She started yelling about all the money they had spent on medical tests, all the worry they had endured, and all the specialists who had wasted their time attending to him. It was then that Nelson finally admitted he had been faking everything, but his confession only made the situation worse. He said he started it all because he was jealous of my medical school acceptance and all the praise I was receiving. He claimed he was hurt by having to compete with me as I always achieved academically. He said that even though we had both been adopted, they had always favored me because I looked more like them and was easier to raise. Our parents were devastated by this accusation. They tried to explain that they had never treated us differently because of our adoption, but Nelson wouldn't listen. He said that years of seeing me receive praise for my achievements while he struggled in school had damaged his self-esteem. The conversation turned into a huge fight with everyone shouting. Nelson accused our parents of emotional neglect. Our parents accused him of manipulation and lies, and I was caught in the middle with accusations flying in all directions. The worst part was when Nelson directed his anger at me. He accused me of volunteering in hospitals just for appearances, not because I actually cared about helping people. The confrontation ended with Nelson storming out of the house. He said he was going back to university and never wanted to see us again. Our parents sat at the kitchen table exhausted and heartbroken. For the next few days, we tried to process what had happened. Our parents apologized to me for not believing me sooner and for allowing Nelson's fake illness to overshadow my medical school acceptance. They said they had been so scared of losing him that they ignored the warning signs I tried to point out. Meanwhile, Nelson had returned to university, but not to attend the summer classes he originally claimed. Instead, he had moved in with some friends and was apparently spending his time partying and avoiding all contact with our family. I finally managed to attend a makeup orientation session at medical school, but the entire experience was overshadowed by the family drama. My classmates were excited and optimistic about starting their medical training while I was still dwelling on what had happened. The financial impact on our family was considerable. Our parents had spent thousands of dollars on medical tests, specialist appointments, and procedures that Nelson didn't need. Most concerning was discovering that Nelson had also lied about other things. Our parents learned he had failed several subjects at university and was on academic probation. The summer classes he was supposedly taking didn't exist. He had used his fake illness as an excuse not to face his academic problems. They also learned he had been borrowing money from relatives by telling them about his brain tumor diagnosis. Several aunts and uncles had sent him cash to help with medical expenses that were completely fictitious. As I write this update, 3 weeks have passed since the confrontation, and Nelson still hasn't contacted our family. Our parents have tried to call him, but he doesn't answer their calls or messages. Next week, I start medical school, but instead of being excited about this new chapter of my life, it's all drama. I don't know what will happen with Nelson or if our family will ever fully recover from this betrayal, especially the economic impact. At this point, I think my parents should hold Nelson accountable in some way, but I don't know if they will be able to do so. Update 2. I've been in medical school for 6 months now, and while I'm doing well academically, the family drama continues. Approximately a month after my last post, Nelson finally contacted our parents, but instead of apologizing or trying to make amends, they called to say he was in the hospital. He had severe abdominal pain and had gone to the emergency room near his university. Supposedly, doctors had found signs of appendicitis and were preparing to operate. The person who supposedly called from the hospital spoke on Nelson's behalf, saying he wanted them to come see him. Our parents were torn between wanting to support him if he was truly sick and fearing it was another manipulation. They called me at school to ask what I thought they should do. I told them I couldn't say for sure if he was lying this time, which was likely, but that if they decided to go see him, they shouldn't pay for anything. Mom and Dad drove the 4 hours to Nelson's university town and went directly to the hospital. Upon arrival, they discovered that Nelson was not registered as a patient. The emergency room staff had no record of anyone with his name being treated for appendicitis or any other condition. Our parents spent the next few hours trying to locate him. They called his friends, checked his apartment, and even contacted campus security. Finally, one of his roommates admitted that Nelson had asked him to make the call pretending to be from the hospital. They found him at a local bar, perfectly healthy, and apparently surprised that our parents had driven all the way there to check on him. When confronted, he claimed it had just been a joke to see if they still cared about him after everything that had happened. This second deception was the last straw for our parents. Dad told Nelson he was cutting off all financial support, including tuition and living expenses. Mom told him she could no longer trust anything he said, and that he needed to seek professional help if he wanted to have any relationship with the family in the future. Nelson's reaction was that his parents were overreacting, and that this was just a joke not to be taken so seriously. The confrontation ended with the bar staff asking Nelson to leave because he was causing a disturbance. Our parents drove back that same night, and Mom cried for most of the trip. When they returned, they shared something with me that explained a lot about Nelson's behavior. They told me his biological parents had abandoned him when he was 4 years old, leaving him at a relative's house and never returning. He had spent almost a year in foster care before our parents adopted him. They said the social worker had warned them that Nelson might have attachment issues and a fear of abandonment, but they thought their love and stability would help him overcome those traumas. They wondered if his pattern of inventing medical emergencies was his way of testing if they too would abandon him. I may see Nelson differently now, but it didn't excuse the harm he caused. Understanding why someone acts destructively doesn't make the destruction any less real. Meanwhile, the financial consequences of Nelson's lies were accumulating. Our parents had to take out a loan to cover the medical bills from the brain tumor farce. They also lost money on non-refundable deposits for summer classes that didn't exist. Worse still, some relatives Nelson had borrowed money from began demanding repayment. When they learned the brain tumor had been fake, they wanted their money back immediately. The stress was affecting their health and their relationship. Mom started having trouble sleeping and lost weight from worry. Dad wasn't doing much better either. They began to argue about how to handle the situation with Nelson and if they were somehow responsible for his behavior. During autumn break, I came home and found the house felt completely different. The atmosphere was tense and sad. They asked about my classes and tried to show interest in my medical studies, but I could tell they were distracted, worried about Nelson. I also discovered that Nelson had been contacting other family members with new versions of his story. Each new lie required our parents to do damage control. The worst part was that Nelson seemed to be getting worse instead of better. His lies became more elaborate and desperate. The situation came to a head when Nelson called our parents one night saying he planned to harm himself. He claimed he couldn't live with the pain of being rejected by his family and that he preferred to end his life rather than continue suffering. Our parents were terrified and immediately called emergency services in Nelson City. Police and paramedics were dispatched to his apartment for a welfare check. They found Nelson at a party, apparently having a good time with friends. When asked about his suicide threats, he said it had been a misunderstanding. This incident convinced our parents that Nelson needed professional intervention, but they were no longer in a position to help him get it. They had already spent so much money dealing with the consequences of his lies that they couldn't afford private treatment. They tried to connect him with mental health services through his university, but Nelson refused to cooperate. He insisted he didn't need help and that the problem wasn't him, but our family. As I write this update, 3 weeks have passed since Nelson's last contact with the family. We don't know where he lives or how he is supporting himself. Update 3. My parents have been hesitant about what to do with my brother, but I haven't. What he did has directly affected me. The turning point came 3 months ago when Nelson made a decision that crossed a line I cannot forgive. He contacted my medical school administration directly to try to get me expelled. In his complaint, Nelson claimed that I had gained admission to medical school through fraudulent means, specifically by lying about my volunteer work and exaggerating. He suggested the school should thoroughly investigate my background before allowing me to continue in the program. The school administration took his complaint seriously, as they should have. They called me to a meeting and presented Nelson's accusations. I had to do extra work that took time away from my studies to prove that all the information I had applied with was truthful. I was surprised by the level of detail and sophistication of his lies. Fortunately, I had learned from our previous experiences with his deceptions. Since I kept copies of all the evidence I gathered about his fake brain tumor, including the text messages where he admitted to lying and bragged about deceiving our family, it wasn't easy to discredit him either. The school's investigation lasted 2 weeks. They were the most stressful 2 weeks of my life. I made the decision to sue him. Our parents supported my decision, although it was difficult for them. They too had reached their limit with Nelson's behavior, especially after learning of his attempt to sabotage my medical education. Therefore, they are also going to sue him for all the expenses they incurred due to his stunts. Luckily, my grades are excellent and I have good relationships with my classmates and professors, so his attempt to attack me hasn't had as many repercussions for me as he thought. But still, I don't want to be worrying about him when he decides on another one of his big ideas. And as for my parents, I'm happy that they have finally made the decision to pursue legal action against him. If he pulls these kinds of stunts and no one stops him, he will continue to do so because it's just fun for him while my parents are buried in debt. So despite those 2 nervous weeks I spent dealing with this problem, at least my parents are now going to do something about it all. It's not ideal because they should have done it a long time ago, but it's better than nothing. Update 4. Of all the things I have to tell you about Nelson, the one that has impacted me the most is that my parents have requested the annulment of his adoption. I didn't think they would go to such extremes, but they requested it citing his fraud, and a judge approved it as this was an extreme case where they no longer wanted to be related to him. Legally, it doesn't have major consequences because a possible will could be changed to leave him nothing. And since he is of legal age, it's not like my parents are still responsible for him. However, they had endured too much and even their marriage was suffering. After months of therapy, they decided to take this step. I don't know what to think about this because regardless of whether he is no longer legally my brother, I hadn't considered him as such for a long time. As for my lawsuit, I have managed to have Nelson compensate me with over $5,000 for his attempt to harm me. Medical school is expensive, and that amount doesn't even cover a month, but at least I have a document that says I won a lawsuit against my ex-brother, which I think will be useful in the future if he tries to attack me again. I don't think he will because he is no longer part of the family, but I'm not complaining. Besides, winning this lawsuit after everything he did is extremely symbolic. I think that makes me happier than the money itself. Regarding my parents, it's another story. I don't know how much money they lost because of Nelson, but their lawsuit got them close to $40,000, an amount he doesn't possess and will have to pay in installments. My parents are happy with that, although I don't know if it covers all expenses or simply is more than they expected to recover. They told me they want to use that money to help me with my student expenses. I have a partial scholarship that covers a small part, and also loans they helped co-sign which were affected by the delay Nelson caused with his fake illness. I don't know if they are doing it out of guilt, or because they genuinely want to help me. But either way, I am grateful because anyone studying medicine knows how expensive it can get. I don't know much about Nelson. I have avoided contact with him, and my parents have done the same. The only contact will be for him to pay his debt. As far as we know, he left university once my parents stopped helping him. He also had some student loans, but that's all we know. To be honest, the less I know about him, the better.